By the end of today's episode, you will feel prepared and better able to spend the holidays with narcissistic parents without losing yourself or your mind. Welcome to Heartbreak to Wholeness, the podcast helping you heal from the mindfuck of narcissistic relationships and move towards the secure, peaceful woman you want to become. I am your host, Bree Walta, relationship clarity coach and EFT certified practitioner. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to Heartbreak to Wholeness. As we head into this holiday season, I know that so many of you are preparing to be around family. And for many of you, that family includes narcissistic people. And maybe you have done some work to heal around this relationship, but the moment that you go back into your childhood home, you feel like you revert into a 6-year-old. The calm that you have built goes away. The tools that you have packed with you seem to disappear. And before you realize it, you are shrinking yourself in order to stay safe. Shrinking yourself in ways that feel way too familiar to your childhood. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone, and today's episode is for you. I am joined by Dr. Meg Haworth, and she is a transpersonal psychologist. She's a holistic chef. She is a best-selling author, and she specializes in working with adult child of narcissists to help them break these generational patterns, to help them heal from the emotional abuse, and to help them find their confident independence. She's incredible, and this conversation will be so valuable for you. In listening today, you are going to learn how to stay emotionally safe during family gatherings. You are going to learn what effective boundaries look like when you're setting boundaries with a narcissistic person. And you're going to learn how to be able to process and be with the anger and the grief and the loneliness that comes up when you start to understand that your parent is never going to be able to love you in the way that you need to be loved. By the end of our time today, you are going to walk away with tools to feel grounded in who you are, no matter what they do at the family dinner, no matter what chaos they start to stir up. And you're going to be reminded, as always, that you are not broken. You are becoming. And remember to stick around to the end of the episode where Dr. Meg will help me pull an oracle card that you can use this week to hold on to absorb the message, to come back into your healing, to stay more conscious in your journey. So take a deep breath and let's begin. Dr. Meg, it's so good to be with you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited about this conversation with you today.
Me too, because we are knee-deep in the holiday season, and a lot of women who are listening to this podcast have had experience in romantic relationships that have been with some person who's on a narcissistic spectrum, whether it's narcissistic tendencies or full-blown NPD. And I think it's more common than we talk about, where these women listening also have parents who are on that same spectrum. And I know that you are very passionate about talking to women who come from narcissistic families in how they can help to understand that dynamic and be in that dynamic, maybe without fully cutting that person out. So the holidays bring with it a lot more opportunities that we have around people that maybe we don't see very often. So let's start with, can you just break down for us why, if you have a narcissistic parent, why do you sometimes find yourself in narcissistic romantic relationships as an adult?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's a really important one to look at. I think a lot of people who end up in narcissistic relationships have one parent or the other that are highly narcissistic or maybe have the full-blown disorder. But it's so hard to see your parent this way. Yet, if you grow up with a narcissistic parent, you're entrained and programmed with so many different beliefs that we all move forward in life with our programming, and then we're attracted to others based on what it is that we believe about ourselves as a result of growing up in that narcissistic family system. And so that family system feels there's a familiarity to it. that we're used to. We're used to being dismissed. We're used to being belittled or shamed or put down. And so because that's such a natural thing, it's almost like you almost sort of expect it in a romantic relationship until you wake up to it and say no more. And then you seek help for it because there's so many layers to emotional abuse of this magnitude and so many things that it does to the holistic system, mental, emotional, physical, energetic, and spiritual. And so to address all those layers are really, really important. And that's one of the most empowering things you'll ever do is to seek the help from somebody who can really get in there with you, someone who really understands narcissistic abuse. Because when they don't, the therapist can actually do a lot more damage,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you're in that system, it's like that's
Mhm.
the water that you're swimming in. You don't know that
Yeah.
that's not a healthy way to be in dynamic with people. If your
Yeah.
water that you know is the narcissistic water. It's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
relationships are just supposed to be this way. To your point about being dismissed and devalued and be like
So,
being made to be small. I think that
yes.
unless you know differently, you
Hmm.
don't know differently. So
Right.
part of that awakening process, part of that opening your eyes can be really painful when you start to see your parents for who they are, if they do have
Yeah.
narcissistic tendencies. So let's just imagine the woman listening has sort of an understanding that her parents are narcissistic. She understands that she's found narcissistic men in her adult life because of her parents and is trying to shift out of both of these relationship dynamics, but doesn't want to cut her parents out totally and wants to see her parents for the holidays. So, how could she prepare for that experience?
Wow. Yeah. So if you're aware of all of those things and you've been working on yourself, you've been working on educating yourself about the impact it's had on you, because ultimately, I think that's the most important thing. Most of us walk into the world of watching Dr. Ramani and many videos, watching my videos on YouTube and really learning about narcissism. But I think it's so important to identify how has it been damaging you. And primary thing that I see across the board with clients is that we're entrained to uh, focus on the narcissistic parent. That's everything has to be about them. That's like their main modus operandi is it's all about me. And so that means you neglect yourself. And so to your question, learning to put yourself first is incredibly difficult for an ACON, adult child of a narcissist, who's been conned into believing you're not good enough, you never get it right, you're not lovable, you don't matter, all of these different programs that are running in us. And so working on that is a really important part of before you get into the room. Now, if you haven't been able to do that, you haven't gotten there yet, there are some tactics that you can use when you go into a family event. You've got, you know, maybe it's your narcissistic father, and then your mom is maybe an enabler, and you've got some siblings that are also in that narcissistic spectrum. Um, so I always say it's really important to go where the love is in the room. Go to somebody, like, even if it's one of the little kids coming up in the family
Yeah.
and go play with that little kid, go to the little dog so that you're focusing your attention more on the beauty and those good feelings that you want to try to maintain while you're around your narcissistic parent. It can be very, very difficult because one of the things that they tend to do is they tend to bait you and set you up for failure in front of other people. They may put you down in front of other people. And, your reaction to that is if you play into them, and this is a really important part is like when they start doing that, if you remain silent and in this place of calm uh strength, they don't know what to do next. And
Yeah.
then they end up looking like the problem because they are ultimately the problem.
Yeah.
you know? And it's hard. It's hard to disengage when you're used to being engaged by a narcissist in the room, where they'll push at you and push at you and push at you and try to get you to react
Yep.
because they love for you to get into the argument with them in front of everyone else so that suddenly they become calm and go, oh, see, you're crazy,
You're crazy. Yep. You're the
Yeah.
toxic
So
one. You're causing the scene. Absolutely.
masters of turning the table
Yeah.
on you and making it look like you're the problem and blaming you for everything that goes quote unquote wrong and never taking accountability. So the less that you engage with them, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. I think that it's so helpful to like name what you're working with, right? To almost have the expectation for yourself that they are going to call you out on something, that they're going to make some sort of awkward statement in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Like whatever has happened in the past, setting that expectation that it's probably going to happen again. And so
Yeah.
when it does happen, you hopefully can minimize that surprise element of like, oh my God, like being caught off guard. You're less caught off guard, even though it still hurts that that's how this relationship works. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, Freddie's being Freddie, right? I can expect Father Freddie, I don't know, Father Freddie, like the dad, the dad figure.
So weird. That's my father's name. I
Oh
love
my
that you
God.
even like channeled that in, you're just like, whoa, she's
Whoa,
good.
that's creepy. Oh, that's cool. Uh, yeah, like Freddie's being
Yeah.
Freddie, right?
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
expect that probably nothing has changed since the last time I saw him. He's still the same
Exactly.
personality, working with the same stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, naming it that way, like calling it out to yourself, helps
Yeah.
to helps it be less like feel less personal,
Yeah.
even though what they're
And
saying
that's
is painful.
important to depersonalize this
Yeah.
as much as you possibly can. And this is you need to do healing on yourself to get to that place of
Yeah.
depersonalizing because they want you to take it personally. That gives them what everyone calls narcissistic supply, but they're really stealing your energy
Yeah.
from your energy field, because I work really with the human energy system and how specifically they pull on your center of personal power, your third or solar plexus, and they're just draining that energy center because the less confident you are and the less powerful you feel, the easier you are to control. And that's what they want.
Yeah.
That's what they need. They
Yes.
need to have you under the control. And so by sitting in that silent space and just not saying anything, just let those words fall in the room
Yeah.
and just see how everyone else reacts to those words because they'll all be like, did he just say that?" Did
Yep.
she not? She didn't fight with him this time. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Not easy by any stretch. This is not easy. But the first time you do it and it works, you're just like, oh my
Yeah. You need that
it's
little bit
great.
of experience and validation of like, oh yeah, that was the right choice, which helps every other time feel more doable when you're ignoring what they're saying.
Exactly.
Okay. So
Exactly.
find love in
Yeah.
the room. Find the
Find the love in the room.
even if it's a dog or a young person,
Yeah.
ignore as best you can, ignore the bids for reaction that they're going to try to get from you.
Yeah. And it's mainly don't engage with them because that's what they're trying to get is a response out of you. And so you could sit in that silence for a moment and then just change the subject or turn to somebody, like, oh, you were telling me about your new house,
Yeah.
how is that?
Yeah.
And so then you're just moving the attention to somebody else in the room. So basically you're working with the energy. And if you think of it that way, I'm now working with the energy in the room. I can redirect it. And it's exactly what we do with small children, right? We
Yeah.
redirect them. The narcissistic parent is a small child, and you need to really think of them that way. Emotionally, they get stunted at about a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years tops emotionally. And so
Wow.
you were raised by this emotionally stunted being. And so when you start thinking, this is a small child who's never developed their emotional body, I'm developing mine because I'm working on myself. or I wouldn't be listening to this podcast, right?
Yep.
I think people that are seekers are going to be listening.
Yep.
And now I can try something different. I can make a different move. And I'm going to use the energy to go to somebody in the room who's got something happy going on in their lives. Like, oh, you just got married last year. How's the new marriage? How was your honeymoon, or how was your trip to Peru? Just whatever it is that
Yep.
will bring you back into the joy in the room and away from how the narcissist is trying to take you down. Um, And then you'll also watch them take other people down
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not, you don't have to rescue those people. But you may want to give love to that person,
Yeah.
give them a space to talk in another room or something. If you're strong enough, if you feel strong enough to provide that kind of thing.
And to
Yeah.
go back to what you said earlier about this being really challenging, there's
Yes.
there's layers here that I see of, okay, so you have the awareness that your father, Freddie is this way, right?
Yeah.
Freddie's being Freddie. You have this awareness. And then there's this layer of acceptance that
Mm,
has to happen, I think, before you can really step into your power around shifting the way that you show up in that energy field. And the
yeah.
acceptance piece is really hard because I think there will be a part of us that always wants our parent to show up as the parent that we needed
Yep.
and has a really hard
Absolutely.
time like accepting that they are a 1 to 3 year old mentally and emotionally.
Yeah. It
How
is.
how can the listener work with that grief and that loneliness and that anger, like all of the things that come up when you hit that moment of acceptance?
Yeah, and it's getting to that moment because you're right. This is an incredibly important part of the process of healing is accepting this is how they are. They're never going to be able to be the parent that you hope they would be. And because we are hardwired to, very deeply as children, we know and expect our parent is supposed to love and support us and guide us. And, we're hardwired for that. And so it's not about bypassing the hardwiring, it's about accepting what actually is happening, and that is a process, and there's so many ways to get there. I mean, my favorite is somatic psychotherapeutic techniques so that you're getting a holistic perspective, how you're holding it in your body, releasing that from your field, um, and releasing the beliefs, those limiting core beliefs from the field, the programming. But I mean, things that you could do before you even go. You can do some journaling. You can write that letter to the narcissistic parent that you're never going to send. And it can be as inflammatory as you want it to be. All those things that you haven't been able to say because you're not allowed to. I call it a prison of silence. You see me doing this here because it's the fifth center. Your center of self expression is really valuable and important because it's all about you and who you are and how you show up in the world.
Yeah.
So, and then they shut it down. And you can bet they're gonna shut you down in some way at the event, and they may try even harder when you don't engage.
Yeah.
And you may have to excuse yourself. You may have to leave. Always have an escape hatch. I think that's also really important,
Yeah.
whether that be somebody else at the party who really gets you and is there for you, or you can excuse yourself and go home,
Mhm. I think that's a
you
really
know?
important, I don't know, maybe understated thing of just like, it's okay to leave. Also, leaving is a
Absolutely.
boundary,
Yeah.
right? That is a self boundary that we can have for ourselves of if I feel unsafe or too dysregulated or like I just no
Mhm.
longer want to be in the presence of these people, I get to go home and they
Yeah.
get to have their feelings about that. And that gets to be
Yeah.
okay.
And if you're in another city, if you're away from your own home and you don't really get to go to your own home, then make a plan. Have a friend you can go to, have a hotel you can go to, or even just a hotel lobby or, just some place where you can sit and read or write or go for a walk or something where you can just get away and then restore your own energy somehow.
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
something for you. But having that plan in mind is going to be very important instead of just, like winging it, trying to figure out like, okay, what am I going to do now? I'm leaving this house and I'm in a weird neighborhood. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I got to get out of here. I
Yeah.
got to protect my energy. So I think that's important to really think through
Mhm.
what you need to do for you.
Yeah.
So,
And I would say if
yeah.
you, especially if you're traveling out of state or long distance, don't stay with them. Like, get your own hotel
Yeah.
room. You need to have the separation. You need to have the place that you can go, the safe place, because it will
Yeah.
be so much more challenging to have to spend 24 hours with them than popping in for 2 or 3 hours for a dinner or for, Christmas gifts or whatever you're doing. And I think just
Exactly.
mentally knowing that you have that other place to go, you can kind
Yeah.
of like gather all your energy for this one event and then go back and like decompress, call your safe people, write the letters, do whatever else you need to do to process what just happened. But it's sort of like doing a sprint instead of a marathon is kind of the way I look at it. Giving
Yeah.
yourself that knowing that at some point in this evening I will feel safe in my space by
Yes,
myself.
exactly. Yeah, because you're your own best ally.
Mhm.
And you've been trained to see yourself almost as your own worst enemy because you've been blamed for everything. And so remembering that, like, you know what, I can protect myself. I can be self-loving and self-caring, and I can provide a space for me to go and be me and get back to me, get back to feeling centered again.
I love that. Another thing that I just thought of that the listener might be asking themselves is if they have this newfound awareness. Let's say between the last holidays and these holidays, you've really seen the light. You see that Freddie is
Yeah.
Freddie, and you have done some work around being able to detach the personalization of his actions, and you are setting your boundaries with him and spending a lot less time. Sometimes I think there's like a desire to try to explain our shifts in behavior or explain what we see in them as like,
Mhm.
I see that you have narcissistic tendencies and this is what I'm now going to do for myself to protect myself, right? Like I think there's part that comes up with at least clients that I've worked with that wants to try to explain why they're going to be acting different. I see you shaking your head. So what
Yeah.
would you say? What would you say? What's your advice?
No, don't ever call them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that creates narcissistic injury, which creates rage response, which creates then the smear campaign, so it escalates. The whole thing escalates. It gets worse and worse and worse, where now they're going to really super isolate you from everyone else in the family because they're going to create that story and make that story really big about what a horrible person you are.
Yeah.
And so it will literally undo the work you've done on yourself. So it's better just to show them who you are becoming by not engaging, not over explaining, not even telling very much about your life, you know? Because even if you tell them the high points, my practice is doing really well, things are really great.
Yeah.
He's gonna or she's gonna try to twist that and say something negative, make it into something a negative kind of response. And they're not going to stop being who they are. They're not going to stop being how they are.
Yeah.
The best thing you can possibly do for you is to learn to stop becoming their target.
Mm.
So, and the way you stop becoming the target, because if they start to figure out, well, I can't get supply from this person anymore. Like, this
Mhm.
isn't working. They're going to target somebody else.
Yeah.
But as you get stronger in yourself, as I say, I help people go from being wounded ACON, adult child of a narcissist who's been conned, into becoming a healed icon and
Mhm.
an
I like that.
icon in your own life.
Yeah.
And that's somebody who's independent, confident, original, naturally you. And you can even ask yourself those questions. What will help me feel my independence in this moment? What will help me feel more confident in this moment? What's original to me? What's the thing that's best for me right now? And then what's naturally me? And those aren't always easy, but you're talking about somebody who's already been working on the pathway. and thinks, well, maybe I should confront them. It's the worst possible choice you could make in this situation. It's really inner work you do on yourself without ever talking it through with that narcissistic person, because they will not go there with you, because they cannot self reflect. They cannot see themselves as they truly are. If they did that, they'd have to touch their shame, they'd have to touch their guilt,
Yeah.
their pain, they'd have to take responsibility. These are all things they're never going to do. Their disorder will not allow them to do it. And the way I describe it is they made a decision very, very young to cut love off. They cut it off from going out. They cut it off from coming in. They fake love to get what they want. So they use that as like a mission to get what they want, but they're actually quite delusional. They've created this whole idea of who they are, and you're supposed to play into that idea at all times. If you go off script at all, the script they have in their head, you're in big trouble. And
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
it's just sometimes hearing it described in a different way is just really helpful.
I think the more that we can reiterate that this really is, like you said, it's like a disability. And maybe that's not the exact parallel to draw, but just like you wouldn't expect a blind person to all of a sudden be able to see,
Mhm.
it's if we can look at narcissistic people, especially a narcissist, with
Mhm.
that same inability to be able to hear you, to be able to relate the way that you relate, to be able to have genuine connection.
Yeah.
It's not that you're doing it wrong. It's not that you're trying the wrong way to get them to do those things. It's that they just literally can't.
Right.
And the less time that you spend trying to do that, trying
Yeah.
to trying to help the blind person see, and the more
Mhm.
time you spend taking care of yourself in that dynamic, the better off that you're going to be in that. I really want listeners to hear that. It's not that they're attempting in the wrong ways.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you talked about boundaries, and boundaries with a narcissist it's not about telling them what you want or need, and because they're not going to be able to fulfill that. It's about you creating the rules you have for yourself,
Yeah.
for your own self-respect, your own dignity, your own value,
Yeah.
and part of that rule is if it gets to critical mass, I'm leaving. Here's my plan.
Yeah.
That's a rule. That's a boundary.
Yeah. Whereas with
So,
people who aren't narcissistic, oftentimes we can say, hey, that really hurts my feelings. Please don't talk to me that way. And
yeah,
then if it continues, then we sort of set the boundary and like go from there. Usually there's a request that's made first and then the
yeah,
boundary. But with narcissistic people, there's no request. There's just the self boundary of you know what they're going to do and you know how you're going to react. You're prepared with your plan of how you're going to
yeah,
do that.
absolutely.
Perfect.
And the more information you give to a narcissistic person, the more likely they are to use it against you at some point,
Yes.
whether it's to your face or behind your back.
Yes.
So
Yes. So,
there's that in play there too. So
yeah, because women listening are empathetic. They are self reflective. And when they understand something, they want to explain it to the other person so that they don't hurt the other person's feelings, right? There's a lot of good intention that comes behind why they may try to explain themselves to a narcissist or why they may
yeah,
try to explain why I left. Like, you know, and to your point about the more information that they have, the more that it's just ammo for them to continue to use against you. So,
yes,
really shifting your mindset from, I don't need to explain myself because they're never going to hear me, again, with that disability,
yeah,
to I'm going to do what's best for me and I'm going to work on my ability to accept that they can't meet me as in a connected relationship that I
yeah,
really want, and then
yeah,
do the grief work that comes around that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
how do you help women in that space? Talk a little bit about what you offer in terms of your service to this world and helping them energetically heal from this.
Yes, absolutely. I have an online course called Healing the Five Primary Wounds of Parental Narcissistic Abuse. And that one is a self-study thing that if, somebody wants to start to learn about energy work and helping you to release the energies, there's meditations and all kinds of guidance in that as well. But I also do one-on-one work in my Iconic Me therapeutic coaching program. And it's really empowering. And so I start really where the person is. I start with the emotions. I use a technique that I created called whole person integration technique. And it with a mixture of inner child work, with um, basically wherever it is your psyche sends us, where you need to go, where your soul sends you. But we do it through the emotions because the emotions, I think, are one of the greatest communicators between our personality, the mental, emotional, physical part of us, and then our soul self.
Yeah.
I really feel like our soul sends us these emotional experiences, and we can resolve them through releasing how we're holding that in our fields, which means we're holding it in our bodies,
Yeah.
and helping the person to see what the emotion itself is doing to the body. Because we even know from science, we know from everyday language
Mhm.
that emotions have an impact on us. We'll say things like, that person makes me sick to my stomach, or
Yeah.
I'm worried sick about this thing,
Yeah.
So we know that emotions make us sick, but they can also make us well. And so ultimately, it's helping people get to that emotional wellness place where they're standing firmly in who they really are, no longer attaching to the narcissistic parent. Even if they're out of the house, that programming gets turned in on us,
Yeah.
especially for the scapegoated child, the invisible child, often the enabler child, that that are empathic and sensitive, and just feel like you feel everything in the world,
Yeah.
which was part of your entrainment too. So it's really releasing yourself from that entrainment, from that programming. And it's so powerful to watch people change, and to change all the way to the cells of the body to where their illnesses release as well.
Yeah.
So, and then I have the nutrition aspect as well, because I was a holistic chef for many years.
Amazing.
So I had that in there into the coaching program. But it's so important to look at the entire being and how all of those parts were affected. And this kind of work, because it's energy work, is rapid acting. So people always ask me, like, well, how long does this take? And I said, well, probably 3 to 6 months, you're going to feel markedly different, like a new person.
Yeah.
And because I've been through it too, I really know the nuances. There's so right, there's
Yes.
so many nuances to this type of abuse,
Yeah.
and how it affects you.
Yeah.
So it's intense.
It is intense and it's doable.
It
I
is. I was just about to say those exact words, and it's
Yeah.
doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think
Yeah.
one of the beauties of a lot of us who are in the helping position in this field is that we can be the living example of what it could look like to go through this dark tunnel that seemingly will never end,
Yeah.
and to be able to come on the other side and understand our worth and our value, and like
Yeah.
just who we are inherently as a valuable person, as a lovable person, when
Yeah.
we have been conditioned by our parents or other loved ones, or and then further exacerbated in romantic relationships, to believe that we are worthless and should just subdue to whoever we're in relationship with. And it's a lot of untangling, but it
Yeah.
can be untangled.
Absolutely.
And
And it's such a beautiful process, and then to be able to track where you once were and where you are now, and just to feel the freedom of stepping outside of the programming
yeah,
and really being you
yeah,
is just the most empowering thing.
I love
It's
it.
why I do what I do. It's so exciting to watch people make those shifts and those changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Meg, if there was one word that you could give the listener to like anchor into when they go into all the family parties and family dynamics this season, what could be a word that they can come back to?
Whew. Oh boy. Peace.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the season, it's all about peace. I mean, ultimately, it's inner peace, peace of love, peace of light.
Yeah.
And as you find the peace inside of yourself, and whatever it takes your process is to get you there, like if it's hanging out in nature, if it's doing some meditation, if it's talking to a dear friend, just getting to that place of peace is just, it's priceless. It's so powerful.
So powerful. Thank you. And to end these, I was going to say sessions. It's kind of like a session. To
Yeah.
end these episodes is the word I'm looking for. We pull an oracle card. So I'll have you help me pull the message that is intended for the listener.
Okay.
So go ahead and close your eyes.
Okay.
And just tune into the energy of the deck, the energy of the woman listening. And I'm starting to shuffle. Whenever you feel like the shuffle is complete, you tell me when to stop.
Okay.
Okay. The card we got was hindsight.
Whoa.
So I will read to you in the book what hindsight has to say.
Wow. That's profound.
Yeah. This book is a good one. Okay. Take a deep breath. Breathe it into your back body. What is it seeing? This is hindsight. It comes to you as a perspective shift to remind you that what is behind you is as important as what is in front of you. A message from the divine, seer of past, present, and future, reminds you that there is much to learn from the past, lessons to be embraced and celebrated, a treasure trove of knowledge and experience to inform your next steps. You choose what to take and what to leave behind while always honoring what was. Hindsight also requires you to be thoughtful and aware of what you are leaving in your wake. Is or was your impact what you intended it to be? In every moment, the decisions you make have forwards and backwards consequences. Hindsight encourages you to gaze gently on the past, for you cannot change it. Yet it reminds you that the awareness in back of you matters just as much as the awareness in front of you.
Wow.
That was pretty fitting.
It's
Always.
incredibly fitting. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Considering, the past and how it informs the present, but how the present, you can change that and create a new future for yourself,
Yes.
Yeah.
So much possibility, so many areas where you can become the woman that you want to be and show up in different ways that feel more empowering with people who have constantly made you feel less than.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Meg. I will put the links to your website in the show notes.
Okay.
Anything else that you want to leave the listener with?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for listening. Thank you so much for having me on here. This conversation has been fantastic. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Yes.
So really important. When something I often say when I do podcasts is to remember to take your healing into your own hands and to listen to the inner voice, that intuitive inner voice, your own guidance system, which you've been separated from if you've been through parental narcissistic abuse, any kind of narcissistic abuse, and learn to listen to that part of the self and allow that beautiful part to guide you. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Because Dr. Meg and I talked about so much amazing stuff today, I want to just nail in a couple takeaways that I want you to really take home with you to remember what we talked about. So from this episode, you have learned how to stay emotionally safe during family gatherings without losing yourself or getting swept up in the chaos. You have learned what effective boundaries look like when you are setting boundaries with a narcissistic person, and more importantly, setting boundaries with yourself. And you now better understand how you can start to process the grief, the loneliness, and the anger that comes with acknowledging that you have a parent that won't be able to love you in the way that you deserve to be loved. As you move through the holidays, know that I am with you. I am just an earbud away from being able to remind you of your strength, to be able to validate your experience, to be able to make you feel like you're not alone. So please lean on this podcast. And until the next episode, please remember that you are not alone.